Hi, everybody. It's Robbie Rozelle, the A&R director of Broadway Records and beloved cabaret icon. I got called an icon today, and I feel like that's really correct. Um, but you know what? I'm gonna skip all the stuff because it's not about me at all. I'm so excited, a little tired, and a little nervous. I've had stress dreams about this, uh, but we're gonna talk to a legend. And it's like already he's a legend. He's 44. I can't. I'm 43. How dare he? Um, he is an Australian comedian, actor, writer, musician, composer, lyricist, and director. He's got 6 albums, 5 DVDs, two-time Olivier winner, two-time Tony nominee, Grammy nominee for this album. He's got 2 honorary doctorates and is a member of the Order of Australia. And that's all to say, he's much more famous than me, and I can't believe that he's even talking to me. Let's welcome in Tim Minchin. Hi, Tim.
Hi,
How
Robbie.
are you?
Good. I'm
Okay,
good.
you must be exhausted. What time is it
No,
right now?
not exhausted at all. It's 9 o'clock in the morning for me, so it's a very respectable time. I had a really good sleep. The world is broken, so there's not much to do. Yeah, no, I'm feeling good. And where you're in New York, so it's
I'm in
like
Astoria. I'm quarantined in Astoria, Queens.
right.
It's 7 p.m. here, but people are watching from all over the world. So hi, world.
Hello, world.
Um,
Do you have
I'm
a
sorry.
cocktail in your hand, Robbie?
No, I haven't. I have a sensible glass of
Ah,
water, but I
cool.
have a Negroni on standby if
Great, in
anything
case everything
happens.
goes wrong or really either really
That's
wrong or
correct.
really right.
So let's talk about. We're here to talk about and celebrate the cast album of Matilda. How did the project come to you?
Well, I was 2008 when I got approached, I guess, I think. And I had been living in England for 2 years by then, and having spent all my 20s, doing the stuff that all of us types do, playing endless cabaret gigs and cover bands and,
Truly.
auditioning unsuccessfully for stuff and a little bit of Shakespeare in the Park and all that. Um, I had somehow become a comedian. Really, I'm a cabaret artist who changed the title of my job, which meant more people bought tickets. And I'd moved to England, and things were really going well. I'd started in sort of tiny theatres, and suddenly I was touring. And unbeknownst to me, the Royal Shakespeare Company, who had the rights to turn Matilda into a stage show, had sent a few scouts out to watch me play on the rumour that I could do tricksy songs and funny dark, because Roald Dahl's all about funny dark, or,
Sure.
about the line between heart and dark, or the intersection of the two. And and then Matthew Warchus, the director, who was already on board, and Dennis Kelly, the writer, who was already on board, they had snuck in and watched my show, and eventually I got a meeting, and they said, "Have you heard of Roald Dahl? And have you heard of Matilda?" And my answers were very, very passionate yeses. And eventually they asked me to have a crack at writing the music and lyrics, and I almost said no because I was trying to become a rock star, and things were
Sure.
going really well. And I had come from a background of writing a lot of music for theatre, and I thought it might be a step backwards, but thank God I said yes, because otherwise I wouldn't be talking to Robbie Rozelle.
That's that's my new ringtone, first of all.
That's
So thanks for that in 2020 when we don't use ringtones. Uh, so of the material, did they ask you to write any spec songs at first? Like just try out the scene?
I
Or
don't think they did really. I think, I mean, obviously that's a very short version
sure.
of the history. Um, One of the cute things, if you're into Destiny, um, is that I had actually written to the Dahl estate 8 years before, asking about the rights to Matilda when I was writing
Wow.
children's theatre in Perth, West Australia for $500 a pop. I at some point I had written to them, and they took my request so seriously that the Dahls wrote back and said, "Well, we are considering, adaptations of Roald's work. Would you send a sample score of your?" And I'm like, Oh, no, I just meant, can I have the rights to do a 2-week season at the Barking Gecko Kids Theatre Company? Yeah, because that's what I was doing. I was turning around stuff like this. I had, when you grow up in Perth, West Australia, there is no, you know, you don't think one day I'll be on Broadway. You think one day I might be able to work for Perth Theatre Company. I mean, or at least when you're brought up like me, I didn't think. I never, ever, ever dreamed or conceived of the possibility that I could actually do it on a global scale. And so that gave, back then in 2000 when I wrote asking for the rights and they said, send a sample score, I can't write music. So I just got scared and left it. I went, oh, that sounds too hard. I was just asking if I could have the rights for a few weeks. I didn't really know how all that stuff worked. And so when Matthew asked me if I was interested, I was able to tell him that story. And not only that, but hand him CDs of the dozen scores I had written for theatre already in youth theatre for free, in my youth. And so and because I was busy, I think the Royal Shakespeare Company had an instinct not to make it hard for me to say yes. So they didn't say, could you audition? They said, please, would you do it? In hindsight, again, I didn't really know how this stuff worked, so I guess I just took that for granted. But they properly gambled on me, I think. But the first song I delivered was When I Grow Up, and because I write quickly, I wrote 12 songs in 6 weeks and delivered them. So I guess they didn't have to worry too much about whether it was right. Hey, boy. That's the boy. Do you want to sit there? I've got you these headphones if you want to listen. I'm just talking about Matilda. Because I delivered quickly, and I guess the commission they offered wasn't a huge amount of money. Their risk was worth it. And the good thing about the Royal Shakespeare Company is that they're never in a hurry. They're not like a corporate commercial profit-driven producer. They're this amazing theatre company who inject money into all sorts of different theatre projects. And so they weren't rushing, and they were happy to take a little risk, knowing that they could bail out if it was no good. And when I delivered When I Grow Up to Matthew and Dennis and Chris Nightingale, the music supervisor and orchestrator, and Rob, I think Rob Howell was there as well. Maybe Pete Darling was there as well, the designer and choreographer. And I just got them all to listen to When I Grow Up one by one around a table at Groucho's in London. And they all went, oh, well, that's a hell of a tune, but it's not really in the story. It's not sung from any point of view. It's kind of a pop song. And they got a real fright that I wouldn't understand how to tell story through song. And I said, no, don't worry. I know, this is the world it's going to be in, this is the musical and lyrical world it's going to sit in. Don't worry, I'll get into the more narrative and more character driven tunes. And then I did. And then, most of the songs from those, the majority of the songs from my original pass are in the show.
Well, we're going to listen to one of them right now. So we're not listening to the entire album because there's so many tracks, and
there's all that storytelling stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The opening number is actually broken up into 3 bits. So the first track we're going to play is Naughty. So here it's Naughty.
Yeah.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. So they say the subsequent 4 was inevitable. They never stood a chance, they were written that way. Innocent victims of their story. Like Romeo and Juliet, 'twas written in the stars before they even met. That love and fate and a touch of stupidity would rob them of their hope of living happily. The endings were often a little bit gory. I wonder why they didn't just change their story. We're told we have to do what we are told, but surely sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty. Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you put it right. Platinum blonde hair dye, extra strong. Keep out of reach of children. Oil of violets hair tonic for men. Yup. In the slip of a boat, there's a tiny red boat. The seed of a war in the creak of a floorboard. A storm can begin with a flap of a wing. The tiniest might pass the mightiest sting every day. Starts with a tick of a clock, all escapes. Starts with a click of a look. If you're stuck in your story and want to get out, you don't have to cry, you don't have to shout. Cause if you're little, you can do a lot. You mustn't let a little thing like little stop you. If you sit around and let them get on top, you won't change a thing. Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you always take it on the chin and wear it, you might as well be saying you think that it's okay, and that's not right. And if it's not right, you have to put it right. But nobody else is gonna put it right for me. Nobody but me is gonna change my story. Sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty.
Boom.
Boom. I love that song. We have a great question.
Huh.
How did they decide which Matilda got to record which song?
Well, that I don't know, and you were probably around the making of this album more than I was, Robbie, because
It wasn't.
well, I guess it was all in hindsight that you were involved. But I don't know is the short answer. I think Chris, so many of the musical decisions about this show are made by Chris Nightingale and by Matthew.
Sure.
And I think because we wanted all the Matildas to, I think there were 3 in the US, weren't there? We wanted them all to be represented. Were there 4 to start with, and then maybe it dropped down after the first year. We wanted all the girls to be represented on the record, and I think we just listened to how they sang each song and gave them the one that they had the greatest strength in, And there's obviously the different songs that Matilda sings require slightly different form. I mean, the kid who can sing quiet the best and hold those long notes and sit in the stillness of it might not be the same as the kid who can belt the hell out of naughty. So, play to their strengths.
Absolutely. The next song we're going to do is When You Hooked Me, the first time I saw the show, and it's School Song.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the use of the alphabet. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I always want to make sure people always go, how did you think of that idea? And the answer is I didn't. I mean, I first saw someone play that trick for using the phonetic sounds of each letter throughout the progress of a song at a cabaret gig in Melbourne a couple of years before I wrote Matilda. And it was my friend Casey Bonetto, who's an incredible songwriter, cabaret artist, musician. He wrote her for Australians. He wrote Keating the musical, Keating the opera. And he did this sort of 12-bar blues called the ABC of Love that used this trick. And I wrote to him and said, can I steal your trick? I mean, it's obviously a completely different sort of song, but he wrote back and said, look, there's nothing new under the sun, mate. Go for it. But I've always made sure I credit Casey with the idea, but it's actually not as hard as it seems. This is the second school song I wrote. The first one was much more gentle, and I hadn't quite got my head around the tone, because when you're writing songs for musicals, as you know, there's so many different things you're trying to do in every moment. And in this moment, I had written a sort of cute classroom song that Miss Honey might teach them that went, if you are able, can you teach me how to be a fireman, how to sail the 7 seas, and all this sort of slightly more floaty distributed. And then I took it into the workshop, and we realized we needed something that created tension, and that was actually musically attached to Trunchbull's world, not to Miss Honey's world. And so I started again with the whole thing and wrote it again. And then Peter Darling and Rob Howell and Matthew, and the amazing thing about Matilda is the absolute seamlessness between the departments, and the idea that in order to make sure these letters landed, that they would choreograph it vertically on school gates. It was such a so amazing to see it come alive like that.
Well, let's give a listen to School Song.
My mummy says I'm a miracle.
My daddy says I'm his special little guy.
I am a princess.
And I am a prince.
Mum says I'm an angel.
Mum says I'm an angel.
Mum says I'm an angel.
So you think you're able to survive this mess by being a prince or a princess? You will soon see there's no escaping tragedy. And even if you put in heaps of effort, you're just wasting energy. Cause your life, as you know, it is ancient history. I have suffered in this jail. I've been trapped inside this cage for ages. This living hell. But if I try, I can remember that before my life had ended, before my happy days were over, before I first heard the pealing of the bell. Like you, I was curious, so innocent I asked 1,000 questions. But unless you want to suffer, listen up and I will teach you. I'll be able to. You listen here, but here you'll be punished so severely if you step out of line, and if you cry, it will be double. You should stay out of trouble and remember to be extremely careful.
Why?
Why?
Why? Did you hear what he said?
Just you wait for his head.
What's phys ed?
Physical education.
It's the Trunchbull speciality.
My mummy says I'm a miracle. Ah!
My daddy said I would be the teacher's pet. Ah!
School is really fun, according to my mom. Ah! Dad said it than the alphabet.
The alphabet. Oh, you gotta learn to listen, kid.
And so you think you're able to survive this mess by being a prince or a princess? You will soon see there's no escaping tragedy. And even if you put in heaps of effort, you're just wasting energy. Cause your life, as you know, it is ancient history. I have suffered in this jail. I've been trapped inside this cage for ages. This living hell. Well, if I try, I can remember that before my life had ended, before my happy days were over, before I first heard the pealing of the bell. Like you, I was curious, so innocent I asked 1,000 questions. But unless you want to, someone listen up and I will teach you. I'll be able to. You listen here, my dear, you'll be punished just for being if you step out of line, and if you cry, it will be double. You should stay out of trouble and remember to be extremely careful.
Why?
Why? Didn't you hear what we said?
Just you wait for his end. Just you wait for his end.
Interjecting elevators, P-Q-R-S-T-U-V-W-X. Why?
Why?
Just you wait for his end.
That was School Song, and it's fantastic. It's so good. We have a great question from Craig, who says, you have a wicked sense of humor. Was that encouraged in your youth? And what comedians did you grow up watching, getting inspiration from?
I don't know if it was encouraged particularly. I'm one of 4 kids, and we always made each other laugh a lot. And but yeah, my dad's a surgeon, and we come from a not conservative as in American conservative, but conservative as in a very nice, loving, gentle sort of household. Well, gentle's not quite the word; it's quite boisterous. But we weren't. We went to very straight schools and very, we're expected to get good grades and played a lot of field hockey. And, it was a pretty, very middle-class West Australian upbringing. So, my parents never said I couldn't do anything, but nor were they like, you follow your dreams. They weren't those parents. They were like, you get A's and B's and you go to university and you'll choose a career. And when it looked like I was going to be a musician, they weren't discouraging, but they were very worried and wanted me to get a vocational degree and all. So it's that sort of family. My siblings and I laugh a lot, and I come from a sort of, my mum's side of the family are pretty interesting people, but as on my dad's side in different ways. But we didn't watch, before I did my first solo comedy gig in 2004, where I played an hour of funny songs and did weird poems and stuff. I had never been to see a full length comedy show. I'd seen 5 or 10 minutes in a club. There's one comedy club in Perth, and Perth's a city of 1 million people. It was then, now it's a lot more. But it just didn't. Comedy wasn't really a big thing. There's a lot of sport and quite a lot of rock and roll, and yeah, so I wasn't, but I watched Eddie Murphy and I don't know, Robin Williams and all those, some of those really famous DVDs of the 80s and 90s, sure. or VHSs that friends passed around. Friends passed around before we were really old enough. R-rated things. I remember Eddie Murphy Raw being a contraband that you'd try and get access to.
Yeah.
But I don't come from a comedy background particularly, and still am not very engaged in or I don't consume much comedy. I read a lot of books, and I don't consume musicals particularly. I really like theatre. I really like theatre, and sometimes there's music, but I'm not particularly drawn to the music-y ones.
So what I'm hearing is you are an intellectual.
I am at best a pseudo-intellectual, I think. Note that all my doctorates are honorary, Robbie.
Listen, it was in your intro.
Yeah.
Lovingly lifted from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the next selection, because the next song is The Hammer, and it features Bertie and Lauren, who did the show in the UK and US. So let's talk about Bertie and Lauren.
Well, they were probably the last 2 people to be cast. Certainly Bertie was the last person, and Lauren was cast quite late in Stratford upon Avon. Of course, this show opened in Shakespeare's hometown at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And we were very careful, and obviously I'm not the casting agent, and I'm certainly not the director. And again, I wrote these songs and kind of skedaddled. I opened my first ever orchestra show in an arena in Birmingham the night before Matilda opened in Stratford. So I was in a pretty strange place in my life, and I was, as much as possible, I let the experts do their work. But and I wasn't hugely involved in the casting of Miss Honey, although I've learned so much from Matthew over the years, and one of them is really about our shared belief that in musicals, authenticity of performance is just as important in musicals as it is in straight theatre. And I believe that very strongly, or at least in the style of musical theatre that I'm interested in making. I will always look for an actor who can get away with the singing before I look for a singer who can get away with the acting. That's the basic. And Lauren is an extraordinary actress and a beautiful vocalist, but she hadn't sung for a few years. And and she's a soprano. She's not sort of a, well, she can do whatever she wants, but she tended towards classical rather than a sort of belty or storytelling voice. And but it was really good because Matthew deciding to cast Matthew and the casting people deciding to cast Lauren was the best thing, because Matilda needs Miss Honey and Matilda herself to be these incredibly authentic people at the center of the story, while chaos and hyperbole and kind of larger than life characters like this maelstrom around them. They have to, when they land in their house in the second act, they have to feel like us. They have to feel all heart and all truth. And as for Bertie, we looked for Trunchbulls, and we had done workshops where the adults were adults and the kids were puppets, and we tried everything. And at some point, we realised that if we were going to physically do with Miss Trunchbull what we wanted to do on the stage, that it was much more likely we were going to find men who could do it. And so we started looking at dudes. And Bertie, you know Bertie, he there's no playing, there's no wink in his Miss Trunchbull. There's no like pantomime. He played her for absolute truth. And when he came in and auditioned, we went, oh my God, he's genuinely scary. Like, he's not finding jokes in this text. And I absolutely went, I think that's what we need. I think we need her to be playing her truth all the time, and to let the comedy come out of the absurdity of her fascistic despotism, not to come out of her, certainly not to come out of her the pantomime dame traditions of gags about that, but just to play her for truth. And he created that character, and those who've seen the show anywhere in the world are seeing a hell of a lot of what Bertie brought to that.
Well, this is The Hammer.
I believe that Matilda Werwood is an exception to the rules.
An exception to the rules. In my school, look at these trophies, see how my trophies gleam in the sunlight, see how they shine. What do you think it took to become English hammer-throwing champion? 1969. Do you think in that moment, when my big moment came, that I treated the rules with casual disdain? Well, like hell. As I stepped up to the circle, did I change my plan? What? As I chalked up my palms, did I wave my hands? I did not. As I started my spin, did I look at the view? Did I drift off and dream for a minute or two? Do you think I faltered or amended my rotation? Do you think I altered my intended elevation? As the hammer took off, did I change my grunt? From the grunt I had practiced for many a month. Not a jot, not a dot, did I stray from the plot. Not a detail of my throw was adjusted or forgotten. Not even when the hammer left my hands and sailed high up above the stands, did I let myself go? No, 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 no. No. If you want to throw the hammer for your country, you have to stay inside the circle all the time. If you want to make the team, you don't need happiness or self-esteem. You just need to keep your feet inside the line. Sing, children. 2, 3, 4.
If you want to throw the hammer for your country, you have to stay inside the circle all the time.
And if you want to teach success, you don't use sympathy or tenderness. You have to force the little squibs to toe the line. Sing, Jenny! Hey, hey, hi!
If you want to throw the hammer for your country,
find the valley line and tow it, and always keep your feet inside the brine. Now get out.
Bertie. Yay, Bertie.
So good. He's
It's
so
good.
good.
He's so good, and Chris Nightingale's work is like in that song, in everything, but the orchestration, this is
The
beautiful.
percussion. Somebody mentioned
Yeah.
the percussion and said, is the piano line in the chorus meant to be classical-esque? The
Yeah,
triads of the first chorus are very Mozart-esque, and the descending bass line in the next chorus is very Bach-esque.
yeah. Me and Mozart and Bach, holy trinity of classical era. Look, I mean, yes, absolutely, and in writing for theatre, it depends who you are, but there's certainly in my writing and in Groundhog Day even more, I'm unashamed of drawing on tropes. I like to think I avoid parody. Even in my comedy, I avoid parody, but I'm drawing on traditions, and obviously the idea of this. I mean, the metaphorical. She's a hammer thrower, and the hammer throw is a sport, and this is the stuff when you get a source text like Matilda the book, you slowly start finding all this richness that the author didn't intend necessarily, but I mean, I imagine Dahl just thought it was funny that she was a hammer thrower because she's sort of a huge, strong freak about discipline, the sort of things you need to be an athlete in that sport. But the idea that if you throw the hammer and you step outside the circle in the Olympics, in the actual sport, that you are disqualified, just landed on me as this fantastic metaphor for a life lived inside. People say think outside the square. Well, yeah. Mr. Trunchbull's whole philosophy is stay inside the line. But of course, like all fascists through history, they start as saying, like your president, the rule of law, like all we're trying to do is say, be good people. They always start talking about rules. But of course, like your president, when the rules don't suit them, they change the rules. And Trunchbull couldn't have been I was going to say she's a pre-Trumpian caricature, but of course, Trump's got less discipline than Agatha. But so when you're writing a song about someone who says, well, you can, in the lead up, you feel this madness of her immersing herself in the experience of when she was a champion. And I became a champion because of my discipline. And later she does a whole song about discipline. But then the chorus is very held in. It's very, as the questioner said, it's sort of pseudo-classical, and it has all the kids being forced to sing these. You can't tell necessarily if you haven't dug into the lyrics, but the kids sing "Circulum est Deus Deus, Circulum," and they, in this sort of choral echo, they're singing in Latin, "The circle is God." Circulum est Deus Deus, and Circulum Magitum Magitum is pseudo-Latin for circle maggots. Circle maggots. And so she's forced them into this very staid choral assertion of her own perfection, which Bach is a good reference because of the sort of mathematical perfection of his music. Not that I know anything about Bach.
You're pseudo-intellectual. You know everything.
I think I know a bit.
You're also an actor.
Yeah.
Who's done stage. Did you ever think about going in as Trunchbull for a bit?
I guess I thought about it. I have thought about it. Yeah, I mean, I would love to do it one day in concert or something. I'd love to have a go at her, but it's humbling when you have a version of her in your head and then you watch something like Bertie do it and you go, oh, okay. That is a whole level, and I am not so much a character actor. I think I'm, and obviously I don't have a big, beautiful classical voice or anything. I think I'm because of all my years of performing songs on stage, I think I'm probably, if I have a skill in musical theatre, it's being able to do the song over and over again, but always sound like I'm telling the truth, you know, which I know is our job, but maybe I'm not so bad at that bit of it, making it feel like it's the first time I've sung it. I don't know if I have the character chops that Bertie has for Trunchbull. I do. I love to play Mr. Wormwood for it, but these, of course, when you're in big commercial musical theatre, you can't do anything for less than 6 months. Otherwise, the machine of Matilda, how much work everyone has to do in rehearsal to get a new actor into the show, you can't just drop in for a week or two. It's not safe, and it's not safe for the kids. And you know.
It's not like doing Chicago. So the next song I'm really excited about because it's somebody that you and I both adore, Leslie Margarita. Yeah, she actually sent me a text before this started to just love on you because she's so sad. She's doing like a Disney podcast right now. And I'm like, Disney Schmizney, this is Matilda.
Disney, are you joking me? God, priorities, girl. Disney will send a stormtrooper around to kill her if she doesn't turn up.
But so this song is written for Mrs. Wormwood. It's loud.
Yeah.
Tell me about how this song hit your brain.
Well, at some point, and I can't quite remember when, there's huge. The big themes in Matilda are about, speaking of intellectualism, are about how knowledge and learning and stories specifically can free you and give you power even when you're little, even when you don't have power. And knowledge is power, the pen being mightier than the sword, all that stuff, a little bit of magic thrown in. But Dahl was sometimes to a fault very disdainful of anti-intellectualism, and I like to think I'm not disdainful of anti-intellectualism, but I'm certainly furious about its rise. So that was, and it's where Matilda and the rest of my material really cross over on the Venn diagram, because it is, Matilda is a text that rails against anti-intellectualism, and both Trunchbull in her despotic pseudo-disciplinarian stay inside the circle way, and Mrs. Wormwood and Mr. Wormwood in their gauche TV over text and like real Philistines, anti-intellectual, superficial, wealth and beauty matter more than the intellect, represent the antagonist to Matilda's quiet obsession with knowledge and stories and narratives and justice. And so, but Mrs. Trunchbull's a true fascist. Mrs. Wormwood and Mr. Wormwood are just idiots. As she says, I think she might be an idiot, as Mrs. Wormwood says about Matilda. But this idea that Matilda sings a song called Quiet, which is, she is craving quiet because she has such a loud mind. And Mrs. Wormwood sings a song called Loud, and basically is a bit of a mockery of, you know, just everyone, you give yourself permission to shine and just tell your truth, and you know your identity and who you are matters just as much, when actually what matters is that who you are and what you base your opinions on are built on a foundation of as much knowledge as you can possibly acquire, right? In my humble opinion. So she sings in her intro, you'll hear, what you know matters less than the volume with which what you don't know is expressed. And content has never been less important. So, I mean, I was worried about anti-intellectualism and loudness over content 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Can you imagine how anxious I feel about the world now?
I surely can. I surely can.
I think we all do too. It's not me. It's all of us. But we all have to check ourselves and make sure we're not only being loud. You can be loud as well, but not only loud.
That's the takeaway from today. You can be loud as well, but not only loud.
Put it on a t-shirt.
This is Leslie Margarita, and if you have headphones in, you might want to adjust them. This is live.
Somewhere along the way, my dear, you've made an awful error. You oughtn't blame yourself now. Come along. You seem to think that people like people who are clever. It's very quaint, it's very sweet, but wrong. People don't like smarty pants what go round claiming that they know stuff we don't know. Now here's a tip. What you know matters less than the volume with which what you don't know's expressed. Content has never been less important. So you have got to be loud. Girl, you gotta learn to stand up and stick out from the crowd. A little less flat, a lot more heel. A little less fact, a lot more feel. A little less brains, a lot more hair. A little less head, a lot more derriere. No one's gonna tell you when to shake your tush. Well, you've got a light, don't hide it under a bushel. No one's gonna look if you don't stand out. No one's gonna listen if you don't shout. No one's gonna care if you don't care. So go and put some highlights in your hair, 'cause you gotta highlight what you got. Even if what you got is not a lot, you gotta be loud. You gotta give yourself permission to shine. Stand up and be proud. A little less, a lot more zing. A little less shh, a lot more showing. A little less dressing like your mum. A little more bum 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 bum. I look nice. You don't. No one's gonna tell you when to wiggle your bumper.
No one's gonna love you if you don't know the rumba.
Everybody loves a little something exotic.
But learning a language is over the top.
It doesn't really matter if you don't know much.
So long as you don't know it with the volume up.
The less you have to sell, the harder you sell it. The less you have to say, the louder you yell it. The dumber the act, the bigger the confession. The less you have to show, the louder you dress it. You gotta get up, you gotta get up and be loud.
So good, my God, she's so good, and you
She's
can't,
so
you
brilliant.
can't not picture her. You know, like that performance is so. I mean, it just grabbed you.
Brilliant. I'm so happy that she was able to come back and close the show.
Yeah, yeah.
At the end of the run.
Yeah,
We should shout out the producers of the Broadway cast recording.
Yeah.
Michael Kreuter, Chris Nightingale, and Van Deen.
Yeah.
Because it sounds spectacular.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sparkles and shines. It's really beautiful. Talk to me about the song Bruce.
Well, Bruce. there's this running theme through the show, which is this reasonably interesting semitone movement up the scale. It's everywhere. It's the beginning of Hammer. Look at my trophies, bum bum ba-dum bum, and then it goes up through these semitones, building. And it is also the beginning of Quiet. Do you have a number? That build, and Bruce is using the same harmonic basis to build up through the semitone. It goes through all 12 keys. Obviously the cake eating scene is iconic in the book and iconic in the movie, and it's the end of our first act. And it's quite an interesting end of first act because your eyes are sort of off the protagonists. It's the reason why adapting Dahl for stage is difficult. He loves telling little vignettes, and especially Charlie, which, that you set up Joe and Charlie and they get to the factory and the rest of the story is about the other people, and Joe and Charlie are just observing. It's a huge narrative challenge. We kind of lent into letting we had to really work on this idea that Matilda was facilitating the heroism of others. So she wasn't just a warrior. She wasn't Jeanne d'Arc going out and doing the battle herself. Her power and her sense of justice and her intelligence were empowering other kids to stand up, to, even though they're little, do a lot, and be a little bit naughty as well. So her sense of rebellion inspires the other kids too. So there's this sense at the end of the first act that Bruce wouldn't be able to eat the cake if Matilda, it's the first little hint of her powers, is he goes, I can't finish this cake. And the light just comes up on Matilda, who's just standing on a desk, just concentrating, and his arm comes back up with a spoon and the song kicks in again. And that's just before the first act, the first hint that there might be something a bit supernatural going on.
This is Bruce.
Bruce.
Yeah.
Bog trotter.
Yes, miss.
You liked my cake, didn't you, Bruce?
Yes, Miss Trunchbull. And I'm very sorry.
No. As long as you enjoyed the cake, that's the main thing.
Is it?
Yes, bog trotter it is.
Oh, well, I did. Thank you.
Wonderful, marvellous. That makes me so happy. It gives me a warm glow in my lower intestine. Oh, cook. What's the matter, bog trotter? Lost your appetite?
Well, yes, I'm full.
Oh, no, you're not full. I'll tell you when you are full, and I say that criminals like you are not full until you have eaten the entire cake.
But!
No buts, you haven't got time for but eat.
But he can't eat it all! Headmistress, he'll be sick!
He should have thought of that before he made a pact with Satan and decided to steal my cake. Well, eat.
He can't!
Eat.
He surely can't!
Eat.
He might explode!
Eat.
A single slice, or even two, Bruce, might have been nice. But even you, Bruce, have to admit, between you and it, there's not a lot of difference in size. He can't, he surely can't, you are the man, Bruce! He might explode, he's quite on, Bruce. Do it.
Silence!
And that's the end of Act One.
Yeah, well, actually, it's not. I mean, you get to see Bruce empowered by Matilda, and then for the first time, you see Miss Honey letting go of this little pathetic, can't even knock on a door, and she is just so excited. And you can feel a relevant metaphor for the time, rebellion spreading like a virus. You know, you can feel Matilda's absolute commitment to justice spreading as other people feel her strength. But like all good despots, when Miss Trunchbull senses that, she tries very hard to squash it. So she changes the rules. She says she's about the rules, but she adjusts the rules. She said, Bruce, if you eat the cake, you can have it, assuming he wouldn't be able to. But when he can, she says, oh, no, that was just the first part of your punishment. The second part is choky. And so she drags Bruce off screaming to this, there's a place you are sent when you haven't been good, and it's made of spikes and wood, this pseudo hell. And Matilda says, that's not right. And that's the end of Act One.
We are getting some questions, so...
You people and your questions.
I know. Well, they want to know. The people want to know things. Ben would like to know, as a composer, how much of a hand do you have in orchestration choices? Do you give a few notes here or there, write some sections out completely, or do you leave most of the big choices up to the orchestrator?
It's kind of none of those and all of them. When I handed my demos into the team early on, they were pretty heavily orchestrated a lot of the time, which set the basic tonal world. So Miracle, you know, the flutes in Miracle going and a lot of those orchestration choices are from my very first demo, and all that's just played in by keyboards into Logic Audio. And so, but Chris took that and ran with it. And there are other parts of Matilda, like all the time she's telling the Acrobat and Escapologist stories, where Chris is, the reason he's credited as orchestrations and additional music is he's taken all the themes I built through all the songs and written whole suites of music that are inspired by and drawn from those themes, but are incredible. I mean, some of the best stuff, and the reason I love the Broadway album and I love the way we're doing it on vinyl is that those stories Matilda tells, that this story of this incredible Dalian story of the Acrobat and the Escapologist that Dennis Kelly just made up one day because he's a genius, is the orchestration behind them is absolutely beautiful. And so sometimes I'm in big control, huge control, and sometimes I hear orchestrations back and I think that's not how I heard it. And I just have to sit with it for a week, because I know that just because I heard it one way doesn't mean it's the best way. And sometimes after that week, I go back to Chris and go, you know what, I just really want it to be more like this. And other times I go, oh, well, that's amazing. That's better than what I hoped. So, yeah, it's a bit of a dance.
You just dropped a nugget in there that we haven't announced yet. So this is an exclusive for everybody watching, but we're working on a vinyl edition of the record.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. And that means a lot to me, partly because I grew up wearing out the vinyl on Jesus Christ Superstar, that, you know, the original brown covered Ian Gillan Murray Head version. And yeah, it's just something about putting a record on that really, really reminds me of when I first got obsessed by musicals.
So excited. We just started working on it. And we're going to put the stories in order within the run of the album.
Yeah,
so that's really
right.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so these stories that Matilda tells didn't make it at all onto the UK album because they were sort of, it's always hard to know where to begin and end. I mean, Groundhog Day is another whole thing because Groundhog Day doesn't make sense at all as an album because the music and the dialogue are so integrated. But we couldn't do the whole show because that would be weird. So in the UK, we decided not to do Matilda's stories because they sit in between song and book. In the US, we decided to, but we chucked them all on the end as a kind of bonus. But now the vinyl's going to have them where they sit in the show, and I think we made good decisions at the time. But it's time to do it this way. I think it's really good.
I think it's really cool. So I'm excited to get it out there. It's going to be out.
It's going to have to be a double album, right?
Oh, yeah, it's two.
Be double gatefold. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cover's just going to be a picture of me dressed in Matilda's
sitting
dress.
on a book.
Yeah, exactly.
The next song that I have is the opening of Act 2. Gabriel and Taylor. Gabriel Ebert, who won the Tony Award for Mr. Wormwood.
Telly song.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let's talk a little bit about Telly and how that song sets up Act 2.
Well, Telly's obviously the companion piece to Loud, and Telly used to be in Act 1. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood both had a song, and we realised they rendered each other a little bit redundant. But we loved the Telly song so much. Well, I said to Matthew, just drop it, and he's like, no. And the beginning of Act 2 in Matilda's interesting. I could be boring about that for a long time, about how Act 2 slowly draws you back into the world. But Telly's obviously another, anthem to anti-intellectualism. The idea that you can judge a man by the size of his screen, and his utter contempt for anything that doesn't appear on his screen. And, the line, watching slightly famous people talking to really famous people, sums up pretty succinctly how where we've ended up,
Right,
it's
right where we are.
It's you and me, Robbie.
Oh,
although I'd say
honestly,
watching very slightly famous people talking to slightly famous people. Watching cabaret artists.
That's what they call me. Thank you so much. Somebody else said, hey, tell people how they can get my record. My record came out 2 weeks ago, and if you're not a child, because there's definitely explicit rating on it, because Daddy says the F-bomb sometimes, you can go to BroadwayRecords.com/DivaRobbie and get my piece of idiocy. But right now, we're over Tim. Why don't we do the next two songs back to back, because they are back to back on the album?
Yeah.
Telly and When I Grow Up.
Yeah, go on.
Somewhere on a show I heard that a picture tells 1,000 words. So Telly, if you bothered to take a look, is the equivalent of lots of books. All I know I learnt from Telly, this big beautiful box of facts. If you know a thing already, baby, you can switch the channel over just like that. Endless joy and endless laughter, folks living happily ever after. All you need to make you wise is 23 minutes plus advertisements. Why would we waste our energy turning the pages 1, 2, 3 when we can sit comfortably on our lovely bumperlies, watching people singing and talking and doing stuff? All I know I learned from Telly. The bigger the telly, the smarter the man. You can tell from my big telly just how clever of a fella I am. Take it away, son. You can't learn that from a stupid book. All I know I learnt from Telly. What to think and what to buy. Now I was pretty smart already, but now I'm really, really smart, very, very smart. Endless content, endless channels, endless chat on endless panels. All you need to fill your muffin without having to really think or nothing. Why would we waste our energy trying to work out Ulysses when we can sit happily on our lovely bafflies, watching slightly famous people talking to really famous people? All I know I learnt from Telly. The bigger the telly, the smarter the man. You can tell from my big telly just how clever of a fella I am. Who the Dickens is Charles Dickens? Mary Shelley or she's Anne Smelly? Charlotte Bronte, do not want to. Jane Austen in composting. James Joyce, oh he doesn't sound nice. Ian McEwan, I feel like spewing. William Shakespeare, Schmilliam Shakespeare. Moby Dick. Hey, easy, Grandma. All together now! All I know, I learned from Telly. The bigger the telly, the smarter the man. You can tell from my big telly what a very clever fella I am. All right. Is it just me or am I amazing?
When I grow up, I will be tall enough to reach the branches that I need to reach to climb the trees you get to climb when you're grown up. And when I grow up, I will be smart enough to answer all the questions that you need to know the answers to before you're grown up.
And when I grow up, I will eat sweets every day on the way to work, and I will go to bed late every night. And I will wake up when the sun comes up, and I will watch cartoons until my eyes go square, and I will
will be brave enough to fight the creatures that you have to fight beneath the bed each night to be a grown-up. When I grow up,
Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you always take it on the chin and wear it, nothing will change.
when I grow
Just because I find myself in this story, it doesn't mean that everything is written for me. If I think the ending is fixed already, I might as well be saying I think that it's okay. And that's not right.
Ah,
Come on. That's such a
yeah.
beautiful song. What a interesting thing to pair Telly and then When I Grow Up after it, and the contrast of that.
Yeah, I guess you send the audience out ideally feeling worried because you've felt this slight rising up of the goodies against the baddies, and then they get squashed down. And I always think I find I find the convention of an interval is I love it in theatre, but I think and I like what it does to musicals. It's an interesting form. You can't apply the 3-act structure of a film or whatever, and you have to work around the interval. Often when I'm writing, I feel like I almost start with the interval. Like what is the story peak at the end of Act 1 that's going to grab us and hold us through that period of whatever you're getting, Maltesers and beer. Do you have Maltesers in America?
We don't.
Pringles and whatever.
Yes. Gross things.
What's going to hold you through your $27 plastic cup of bad red wine and keep you in the right headspace? And then how are you going to bring them back in? And there's lots of different ways to do it. You can come in smack and just like pretend it never happened and jerk them back into the second act. Or you can do what you did in Matilda, which is you leave the lights on, so you let, because you've had a problem, you've set up a world and you've told the audience to suspend their disbelief, and then you brought the lights back on them and you've crumbled your own fourth wall in the middle of the show. So you either go slam the fourth wall back down, or you say, come on, let's come back in. So Telly breaks the fourth wall and he talks to the audience, and it's like, oh, he's a character, but he's in our space. And then When I Grow Up sort of takes all the laughs out of the room and puts you in this like settling back into your chair space and puts you in the philosophical world and makes you feel reflective of childhood and puts you back into a place of innocence, and for adults slight regret for the loss of our youth and all those things that When I Grow Up make you feel. And then out of the back of that you get to tumble back into this quite scary space. So we're going, come on, back into the theatre, stop shaking your packaging and sucking on your wine while we give you a few laughs. Then we're going to make you feel the right things, and then we'll put you back in the story, and by then you'll be ready to go.
The next song that we have up on our queue is Millie Shapiro, who's now a film star, singing
She's
Quiet.
totally- Yeah.
Let's talk about creating Quiet.
So Quiet took a long time. I went in the wrong direction. I thought I should Billy Elliot it, and I should have her second act song. I think traditionally, I don't really know much about musical theatre in any received way. I haven't read any books on it, but I think traditionally you're meant to have your protagonist, belt the hell out of something in the second act. And I remember in Billy Elliot, he sings electricity sparks inside of me. I think it's in the second act. And
Yep.
and I thought that it's got to be something like that. So I wrote this song called Magical, which I hate now. got a good tune, and certainly I could sell it to a Disney film, but it was completely wrong. And Matthew, in his very quiet, gentle way, let me know that it was wrong. But we wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. And I sent him pages of notes, like, so we're going to try and do a song where she's finally about to start realizing she doesn't just have a huge brain, she has a telekinetic brain. And what would that feel like, and where does that put her, that feeling of being able to generate magic? And I said, maybe what it is it's big. Maybe it makes her feel big, and there's an ironic song about how huge she feels, like unbearably huge, given that she's the tiniest thing on stage by convention, well, by canon, and apart from Eric. And then I thought, well, maybe this is the chance where she's always been quiet and her parents have been loud, and this makes her loud, this makes her. And then I realized that, of course, I don't know why I was so stupid about it, but of course, what it should do is make her, for the first time in a long time, feel peace, which, of course, means you have to embrace the idea that your second act, your protagonist diva moment in the second act, is an anti-diva moment. And that, to me, is almost the reason why Matilda's special, is that we were allowed to let those unconventional choices, we were allowed to double down on those unconventional choices. We didn't have anyone telling us that you shouldn't do that. So halfway through the second act in Matilda, in this chaotic world of larger-than-life characters, you end up with a kid standing on a pile of books, taking a breath and leaving it completely silent for 8 seconds, and then landing on a chorus that's nothing virtually but a single note and a slight echo of the ticking of a clock, and a little kid talking about being under their duvet and walking in the woods. And I am very proud of it.
Well,
which is very un-Australian of me.
You should be proud of it. Here's Quiet.
I'm proud of Millie as well.
Ever wondered, well I have, about how when I say red, for example, there's no way of knowing if red means the same thing in your head as red means in my head when someone says red, and how if we are travelling at almost the speed of light and we are holding a light, that light will still travel away from us at the full speed of light, which seems right away. So I'm trying to say, I'm not sure, so I wonder if inside my head, not just a bit different from some of my friends. These answers that come into my mind unbidden, these stories delivered to me for the arisen. And when everyone shouts like they seem to like to shout, the noise in my head is incredibly loud, and I just wish they'd stop. My dad and my mum and the telly and stories would stop for just once. I'm sorry, I'm not quite explaining it right, but this noise becomes anger, and the anger is light, and this burning inside me would usually fade, but it isn't today. And the heat and the shouting, and my heart is pounding, and my eyes are burning, and suddenly everything is quiet. Like silence, but not really silent. Just that still sort of quiet, like the sound of a page being turned in a book, or a pause in our walk in the woods. Quiet, like silence, but not really silent. Just that nice kind of quiet, like the sound when you lie upside down in your bed, just the sound of your heart in your head. And though the people around me, their mouths are still moving, the words they are forming cannot reach me anymore. And it is quiet, and I am warm, like I've said, into the eye of the storm.
Yay.
What a beautiful moment.
Thanks, Robbie.
I'm so tired of you saying that you don't know musicals and blah 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 because you've written 2 perfectly constructed musicals. So enough of that. You don't get to put yourself down anymore.
Well, I don't know if I mean to put myself down so much as to. I don't ever want to assert something as if it's, you know, canon. When I honestly, I love the form and I love the challenge of the form and I love what I hope, you know, to the extent that I have time to keep writing musicals, to keep pushing myself and trying to keep adding complexity and layers. And, you know, I'm not in the game to write hits. I just want to keep mucking around with it. But I'm very lucky because I have accumulated my sense of the form through trial and error and experiment. And I guess I've soaked up stuff from watching musicals, but I, just like with my comedy and my acting and stuff, I'm not trained. And it just seems to suit my brain to just bow a bird and pick things up and stuff. And I just feel really averse to reading. I've got, you know, Mr. Sondheim sent me his beautiful double making a hat thing, and I just am scared. I don't want to read it. I just don't want to know. I don't want to know what Lin-Manuel does. I don't want to know what Bobby and Kristen do. I don't want to know what Jazz Rock. I don't want to know how they think of it, because I just don't. I think it'll just make me think about the wrong stuff. You
doing it beautifully already. So just do what you. It's like Barbara Streisand going to get a voice lesson.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes, exactly. Right.
You don't
or me going to get a voice lesson. I mean, it's a perfect. It's a perfect tool. I'm a perfect tool.
Okay, we are coming to the end. We have 2 more songs. The next is Miss Honey's beautiful song in Act 2, My House. Talk about musicalizing this moment and how that happened.
So it's another moment. You know, this whole part of the musical there's always this tension to make sure there's a moment of a massive key change and a boom, and I just couldn't do it with either of our protagonists, with Miss Honey and Matilda, because they are not demonstrative people. And obviously demonstrative people can obviously undemonstrative people can sing demonstrative songs. That's the point of songs. You could have a mute person who doesn't say a word, and then they sing a song which is their thoughts, and that could be the biggest song in the world. It should be, if you were telling that story. But I just really needed to make sure is that Miss Honey didn't suddenly too quickly become too empowered, and that I'm really attracted to stories that what the protagonists offer one another is not absolution. It's not a gun. It's not a salve. It's not like the fairy godmother says, here's your gown, here's your carriage, here's your horses, here's your footman, here's your hot hair. It's more human. It's more what we can offer each other in real life, which is just, well, when I was in pain, I started a garden, or, you know, like, you can always call me, or, and what Miss Honey has to offer Matilda, who is feeling like she's different and like there's something wrong with her, and they see in each other a huge amount of pain and, to be frank, childhood trauma. Matilda and Miss Honey see in each other both have terribly abusive childhoods, parent figures. And at that point in the musical, all Miss Honey can really share with Matilda is that she's learnt to protect herself, to build a little modest barrier around herself to stop the pain and the hardship getting in, and that she can stay alive with this, what she describes as a small but stubborn fire, and that she can, and I guess to the extent that she's offering Matilda something, she's saying, you just have to hold on and believe in the thing burning inside you. But again, it's the opposite of loud. Miss Honey doesn't have what Matilda has, as we're about to learn, which is Joan of Arc, which is absolute, I will bring down the system. But Miss Honey doesn't know Matilda has that yet. So Miss Honey just teaches her about how she's protected herself. And then Matilda has to teach Miss Honey how to truly stand up later.
And in this song, the Escapologist comes in.
It's my favorite.
Tell me, that's your favorite. So tell me what the impetus was.
So we see, this is the moment when, spoiler alert, when we realize that the story that, as Matilda says, arrives in her head fully written. This story she's been telling the librarian, we realize, is actually a story that the universe has delivered her. So I don't know who's noticed this, but Miss Honey walks out of the library. The first time we meet her, she's walking out of the library, and as Matilda's in the library and she's never seen her before, and she says, Mrs. Phelps, who's that? Who was that lady? And she says, that lady's Miss Honey. She's going to be your teacher. And then immediately Matilda starts singing this story. So it's like in the moment they met in the library, Miss Honey's past lands in Matilda's head. But Matilda doesn't know that's what it is. She just thinks it's a story. And Mrs. Phelps certainly doesn't know what that is. And so all along through the story, Matilda is telling us the story of Miss Honey's past. And in that story, eventually the story affects Matilda more and more and more. So the last chapter of that story, she tells in her bedroom when she's been shut and sort of thrown on her bed. And she sort of becomes the child in that story. And the father in that story, the escapologist, actually comes into her room. It's like her imagination is breaking down the barriers between the past and the present, breaking down the barriers between reality and unreality, between magic and empiricism or whatever. And we get the sense that Matilda just needs so desperately to have a parent, to have someone love her, that she's created this story to create a hero, to sweep into her bedroom and take her up in his arms in a way that her own father will never do. But then in that final chapter, she says, oh, and then he went and he never came back. And you just go, what the hell? What's wrong with this kid that she's created a father figure and then killed him? And so this moment when Miss Honey in the middle of this song goes to the drawer and pulls out the shiny white scarf, and Matilda, suddenly it all crashes down on her. And in that moment, the ghost of Miss Honey's father, who up until that moment we only knew as the escapologist in Matilda's story, that we only thought was a manifestation of Matilda's need, walks in and puts his hand on Miss Honey's shoulder, and we ideally just die inside. And at the back of that song, Matilda suddenly goes, oh, this story I've been telling is your life. And that is completely unacceptable. And I, as this 6-year-old superhero, am not going to let it stand. So at the end of this song, Matilda says, we have to go to the police. And Miss Honey says, you'll never believe they'll never believe us. And in Matilda's head, she goes, all right, this woman's going down. This Trunchbull is going down.
Here's my house.
This roof keeps me dry when the rain falls. This door helps to keep the cold at bay. On this floor I can stand on my own 2 feet. On this chair I can write my lessons. On this pillow I can dream my nights away. And this table, as you can see, well, it's perfect for tea. It isn't much, but it is enough for me. It isn't much, but it is enough. On these walls I hang wonderful pictures. Through this window I can watch the seasons change. By this lamp I can read. And I am set free. And when it's cold outside I feel no fear. Even in the winter storms I am warmed by a sword and stubborn fire. There is nowhere I would rather be. It isn't much, but it is enough for me. For this is my house. This is my house. It isn't much, but it is enough for me. This is my house. This is my house. It isn't much, but it is enough. And when it's cold and bleak, I feel no fear. Even in the fiercest storms, I am warmed by the stubborn fire.
Forgive me.
Even when outside it's freezing, I don't pay much heed. I know that everything I need is here. It isn't much, but it is enough for me. It isn't much, but it is enough for me.
Lord Ward,
Very
come
nice.
on, making me cry. I'm like having feelings here. I've listened to this album for years now.
I don't want you to have feelings. I'm sorry about that. I want you to stay cold. Cold of heart.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Protect
Just near
yourself.
death. frankly.
Yeah, I miss those guys. I live in Australia now and lived in LA for a few years, but leaving London came with a huge amount of heartbreak, and not being able to see Matthew and Lauren and the kids as often is, it's really sad. Especially these days when you can't even get on a plane if you wanna
go anywhere.
No.
Truly.
Mm.
Let's talk a little bit. I'm sure there's not a lot to talk about, but a film is being made.
Yeah.
Right now.
And that would have been going into filming very soon if it wasn't
Yeah.
for everything. But I guess luckily it is a property, as they say in the business, that doesn't age. It's not like Matilda's going to be less relevant in 2022. In fact, as we sort of discussed earlier, I think a lot of the subtextual themes, the themes aimed at adults a bit more, are getting more relevant. It's really exciting. My involvement will be a little bit dependent on what else I'm making at the time. I would love to be around. I'd love to play a little cameo in it somewhere. I certainly want to be involved in it'll be different. The orchestrations will be slightly different just because it's 10 years later and Chris wants to muck around with some stuff, and also it's a different medium. So it'll obviously be shorter. And I have, and this isn't sort of an official announcement, but I have written a new song for it. I guess there's no such thing as an unofficial announcement, but when COVID happened,
you heard it here first.
My tour finished, I suddenly went, what do I have to do? And with films, there's a couple of reasons why you might need to create extra material. The sort of top-down reason is because producers want you to write a new song so it's eligible for awards and stuff, because you can't win song awards in films if they're not written for the film. But much more importantly, because you have to change the form a bit, a song is a very efficient way to get work done, get emotional, narrative, character work done. And if you have to adjust the film a bit, you might find you need a song to nail down a theme that would otherwise take more time to develop. So yeah, I'm quite excited by it. It's just a demo at the moment, but it was so lovely to go back into that world and that musical aesthetic and go, okay, what's still left to write? Left to write. That's a double pun. What is left to write? Write that one down. You can have that. Yeah.
Just give it to him.
Poor old Lynn. He needs a bit of help.
He does. I think he's going to make it someday.
He'll be all right. He just needs to curse.
Speaking of writing, you've written 2 musicals for like huge
Big
musicals.
Ones. Yeah.
Do you have another one in you?
Yeah. I would like to. I hope I have another 3 or 4 in me. They are. You know. It's a tough one, because if you can do anything other than write musicals, you probably should, because they're punished and they're subject to, with Groundhog Day is a perfect example of how musicals can be tossed on the sea of chance and, all sorts of stuff that can happen that makes you, can sort of slightly take your work off you, Groundhog Day was destined to do one thing, and then a New York producer came on and sort of encouraged us to do another, and then dropped it completely and left us in shit. And, and then of course, famously, we came into a town that had 3 hits out of nowhere. And this sort of element of chance, which in musicals and film, you can put a huge amount of work into a thing only to be sort of a bit heartbroken. It puts you off a little bit when you can go, I could just spend 6 months writing a TV show and film it and put it out and people will watch it and it'll land on a platform, or I could just go on tour where it's just me and the audience and no one can stop me doing or saying whatever I want. So yes, musicals are a big commitment. I am writing another one at the moment, although COVID has, you get busy in different ways during this period, and I'm finding it a little hard to make much headway on the new one. But I'm excited by the new one, and the new one is, I'm not reverting to family-friendly fun. I'm going further down the path that I went with Groundhog Day to be more multi-layered and more big-themed, and and just keep trying to get better at the job. I don't really, for me, because I'm so lucky, because I do get to do live and I do get to do telly and stuff. There's no point me sitting down and writing a musical to make a bit of money or something. The only point is to forward my understanding of the form.
Oh, listen, nobody writes a musical to make money.
No, that's right. Well, yeah. It depends. if Disney comes along and says, what about a stage version of, it's a great fun way to, what an amazing, that's incredibly fun. I just don't think I'm suited to it.
So we've come upon the last song of the night. You've been so kind with your time. The last track we're going to play is Revolting Children, because you can't listen to Matilda and not play Revolting Children. So let's talk for 2 seconds about it. And
I know that I talk too long. Revolting Children is a play on a very famous pun of revolting, but it really is just about. It really is a celebration of the fact that what Dahl was always writing about, which is that kids have power. You know, everything you need to vanquish an oppressor you had when you were 5, in a way.
That's the easiest explanation. This is Revolting Children.
Goes into 7/8.
Never again will she get the best of me. Never again will she take away my freedom. And we won't forget the day we fought
For the right to be a little bit naughty. Never again.
the choking or slide.
Never again.
Will I be bullied down?
Never again.
Will it doubted when
My mummy says I'm a miracle. Never again. Never again will we live behind bars. Never again will we know we are revolting children. Every year, revolting times. We sing revolting songs, using revolting rhymes. We'll be revolting children till our revolting's done. And we'll have the trudge for revolting. We're revolting. We are revolting children. Every year, revolting times. We sing revolting songs, using revolting rhymes. We'll be revolting children till our revolting's done. And we'll have the trudge for revolting. We're revolting.
we will become a screaming horde.
Take out your hockey stick and use it as a sword.
Never again will we be ignored.
We'll find out where the trouble is stored.
For its pictures on the board.
It's not insulting, we're revolting. C-U-S-P-L, how we like. If the numbers are wrong, wrong is right. Everyone N-O-R-T-Y. 'Cause we're a little bit naughty, so we've got to stay inside the line. If we disobey at the same time, there's nothing that the church folk can do.
So you take her hammer and if they
You didn't think you could push us too far, but there's no good going now. R-E-V-O-L-T-I-N.
revolting time.
U-S-I-N-G. U-S-I-N-G. R-E-V-O-L-T-I-N-G. It is too early for you, we are revolting. We are revolting children, we sing revolting times. We sing revolting songs, using revolting rhymes. We'll be revolting children till our revolting's done. It is too early for you, we are revolting
Come on.
Come on.
Listen, thank you so much for waking up to do this with me on the other side of the world. You are so kind with your time. We've learned so much today. I think you and I are best friends now.
I think we're very good friends. Yeah.
You're not into that.
As long as it continues with this sort of distance, I'm very happy to be a very good friend of yours.
Thrilled. I won't hunt you down in a theater. I promise.
Anytime.
So here's what I'm going to say to the people who are watching. Follow Tim Minchin at Tim Minchin. You can follow me. I'm at Diva Robbie. You're welcome. follow at B-Way Records to find out about other listening parties that we do and about the vinyl that's coming. And go listen to Matilda. Have some joy in your life. You need some joy. You're stuck at home. Matilda's the way to do it.
Thank you, Robbie, for spending time and being patient with my long form answers, which is my habit. And if you're listening and watching, it's really lovely that you would spend this time with us analyzing stuff. It's cool. There's my boy.
Thanks for joining us.
He hasn't listened to Matilda for years. Did you like it?
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's cool. Cool.
Oh, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What else do you need?
You don't need anything.
What
You just need he doesn't listen to his dad's music. My kids and my stuff, like my daughter, I keep going, why don't you, I've just made a TV series. Why don't you watch it? And she's like, oh, I don't want to. Oh, can I do that actually, Robbie? Can I just do a rude plug just in case people are listening?
Please plug things.
Just in America, my TV show Upright, it's taken a long time to get an American buyer, and a lot of my American fans have been sort of waiting for it. So it's going to be on Sundance now, from early August. So just it is coming, and it is you'll love it, Robbie. It's good. It'll make
What's
you cry.
the name of it?
It's called Upright. It's about a guy taking a piano across the desert.
Great.
Go on, then.
I will enjoy. Get out.
Bye, Casper.
Bye. Well, thanks so much. That
pleasure.
was Tim
Thank you,
Minchin. I'm Robbie Rozelle, and good luck. Wear a mask. Register to vote.
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Yeah.